Hi folks, it's Mike Fisher here, and I want to just walk and talk you through the stress process again. So, the first section we need to explore is what are your general stresses? That's where we start. So, considering that we have a whole range of different general stresses, and I asked you to discuss that with participants in your group, which you did, and you would have covered areas such as debt, relationships, health, work, time, traffic, travel, etc. Those are your general stresses. And then from there, what I suggested is that we look at is what I defined as your core stresses, of which there are 5 core stresses. So according to my workbook, you'll see the shaking the apple tree process on page 13. And we have 5 core stresses. So we have control, we have pressure, we have approval, we have trust, and we have a priority. So let me go through that so that you can understand exactly what those core stresses are really driving. The other thing I did say to you is that those core stresses are directly linked to low self-esteem. People who suffer from stress, anxiety, and fear, they have a self-esteem issue. Now, of course, there's a difference between self-esteem and confidence. So firstly, what we have is control. Now, with control, either we don't feel like our lives are in control and then our lives are totally chaotic. The flip side of that is that we're control freaks and we want to micromanage absolutely everything. So you've got to decide which one it is for you, whether there is total chaos or whether you are mega controlling, what I would call a control freak. That's the first one. The second one is pressure. Now, everything feeds or comes off pressure. And what I mean by that is that pressure's fine, it's okay, it can be potentially really healthy, but I'm talking about the unnecessary pressure that we put ourselves under. That's the pressure I'm talking about, where we sweat the small stuff and we tend to catastrophize or futurize. And that's all consumed by what if and when and how much. And of course, what is the effect that it's going to have on me? Then what we have is seeking approval. Now, that beautifully ties into low self-esteem, because if you are seeking approval, that does mean that everything about you is based on others validating you and reassuring you that you're okay or lovable or enough. And if you are and you recognize that part of you, then your ability to say no is about 0, which means, of course, that you're running on empty. And if you're running on empty, that's a huge trigger for anger and, of course, stress. So it's about learning how to validate yourself. It's learning how to approve of yourself. It's about reassuring yourself, letting that go, expecting other people to do that for you. And of course, we explore that in our programs when I look at the primary needs process. Then we have trust. Now, there is an interface between control and trust. They're relatives, they're family members. When I don't feel like I'm in control, it means that I'm not trusting in the way that I could trust. Or if I don't feel like I'm trusting enough, then I impose control. But within the context of trust, it's not about me trusting you. It's about me trusting me, that no matter what happens, it's going to be okay. I'll survive it. I'll find my own creative way of dealing with whatever curveball life throws at me. So it's about trusting implicitly who I am in the world. And of course, the worst case scenario is that you could die. Now, the reality is once you're dead, you're dead. It's not going to make any difference. Then, of course, we have not making yourself a priority. Now, there is an interface between priority, pressure, and seeking approval. But within the context of priority, if you are not making yourself a priority, it means that you are exhausted, you are fatigued, you are saturated, and you filled to the brim, and you just can't take it anymore. And so the idea is that if you're not a priority in your own life, you're absolutely running on empty. And that will increase your stress levels, your irritability levels, and then, of course, you'll act out your anger. So it's about how to make yourself a priority in your own life. And of course, there's a paradox here. When you are making yourself a priority, people are probably shaming you for being selfish, or not thinking about anybody else. And I have said that this is not about me being selfish. This is about me knowing how to preserve myself. You can call me selfish, but I finally learned how to preserve myself. My yes means yes, and my no means no. And of course, I can think about it, and I can change my mind. So it's very important that we start to understand the interface between seeking approval and priority, because it's all about needing others to validate us. So I hope that part is clear to you. Now, let me go to the next part. Once you have identified your general stresses, from there you go to identifying your core stresses. Once you have identified which is the big core stressor, because you can only choose one for the process, once you identified what your core stressor is, then of course, as you know, there are 5 questions. So what that series of questions is designed to do is designed so that you bypass your defense mechanisms. That's really what we're doing. It's like moving the furniture around in your head. So with those 5 questions, that's where it slightly becomes more difficult, because I got to know what kind of question do I need to ask myself within the context of those 5 questions. Once I've identified the question that I want to shake the apple tree with. So let's take control, for example. Now with control, it's about either relinquishing control or taking control. For me to relinquish control, what do I need to give up? What do I need to accept? What do I need to acknowledge? What do I need to admit and let go of? So let's just explore control. Remember what I said, there's 2 approaches to control. The one approach is where you have to relinquish control. The other approach is where you have to take control. So within the context of relinquishing control, those 5 questions, this is what it looks like. So for me to relinquish control, what do I need to accept? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to give up? What do I need to acknowledge? What do I need to admit? Now, once I've done that, depending which one it is, there's a second part to the process. So, simple example. In order for me to relinquish control, once I've been through those questions, one of those 5 questions are going to kind of punch me in the gut, identify which one it is. Example would be, for me to relinquish control, I need to accept I'm not a superwoman. Okay. If I accept I'm not a superwoman, how would my life be different? Well, I will probably delegate more. Thank you. So if you have to delegate more, how would your life be different? Well, I'll probably have more time for myself. And if you have more time for yourself, how would your life be different? I will be more relaxed. And if you're more relaxed, how would your life be different? I'll be happier. That's where we stop. So for each of those apples, what we have to address is how we ask ourselves the question. So let's go to the next one, pressure. It's all about stop putting ourselves under unnecessary pressure. That's where we start. So to stop putting ourselves under unnecessary pressure, what do we need to accept, let go of, admit, acknowledge, etc., etc.? Yeah? With seeking approval, we've got to stop seeking approval. We've got to learn how to approve or prove ourselves. Once again, you've got 5 questions. So let's go to trust. So for me to start trusting myself, what I need to accept, let go, admit, give up, etc., etc. So for me, to make myself a priority in my own life, what do I need to accept, let go, give up, acknowledge, etc., etc.? And then, of course, go to the second part of the process. The key here, folks, is you need to be able to identify how you create, how you perpetuate suffering in your life, unnecessary suffering. And once you've identified how you create the suffering, you have a choice whether you continue the suffering. And what I often say is get on with the suffering. Because if the suffering works for you and you can endure it, well, fantastic, get on with it, but don't complain about it, because that's what we tend to do. We complain to the other person about it. That's not healthy. We need to be able to embrace our own suffering and find a way of accommodating it and get on with it. But if it's too painful, then you can make choices how to stop suffering. Now, I'm not suggesting it's easy. I'm not suggesting it's a walk in the park. That is not where I'm going with it. I'm suggesting you need to bring it into your awareness and find a way of dismantling the suffering. It's not going to happen in 5 or 10 minutes. Our lives are complicated and complex. And on the basis of that, we need to find a creative solution to that. So that is the next part of that process. And then finally, I'm going to put it up on the screen, and you'll see that there are key components that you need to go through in order to find a way of working this process into your life. But the most important component here is that once you recognize that you are stressed, you have to stop everything that you're doing and you have to shake the apple tree. And I mean, stop everything that you're doing and shake the apple tree. Do that body of work, identify what creates the suffering, find a way of jumping the curve. Once you have achieved a positive result, it could take days, weeks, months, or years. Then, of course, pat yourself on the back and give yourself a reward. It's a heroic experience. I leave you with that. Thanks very much for listening. Cheerio.